Welcome to Kingdomize, the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Welcome back to Kingdomize, the podcast. Bruce Mann is here with me again. This is going to be fantastic. Bruce, I'm loving your Kingdom Leadership series. We're on week 5, talking about wisdom, and I was hoping someone would come and talk to me about this. I've needed this discussion for so long, so this is going to be fantastic. So, Kingdom Leadership, wisdom. Your tagline here is leading ourselves and others skillfully. This is going to be so good. So we're glad you're with us today. I'm here with Bruce Mann. I'm Brian Beatty from Kingdomize Global. And here we go. Let's talk wisdom.
It's a little daunting, to be quite honest with you, because of sort of the idea that, let the wise teach the wise. I don't necessarily feel that way, but
this is why I called you, Bruce.
Yeah. It's a bit of a daunting subject, but we need to. It's a necessary subject. And we're not today looking primarily at tactics as much as just the heart and the awareness to be able to lead ourselves and lead others skillfully.
Yeah.
So
and Bruce, can you do something for us in this introduction? Just define, so we know what normal wisdom is, but this is a series on leadership. So just kind of maybe differentiate between here's wisdom for the average bear, and we all need, but what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we want to explore this idea of wisdom, and I'm gonna interchange it with the word skillfulness a little bit, because wisdom has a purpose. It's not just sort of this glow around our head that says we know something and we got all the knowledge. It's not about just knowledge. It's about application. It's about understanding. It's about doing something with what we know and what God has revealed to us and shown us. And so obviously as a leader, you're leading somewhere. You're leading for a purpose. You're leading to do something and achieve something. And so really that's the foundation, or that's the place we want to go to here.
Excellent.
Is understanding how do we do something as a leader and do it skillfully, with efficiency, with productivity, with blessing for ourselves and for others.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get just some definitions on the table. What is wisdom? Is it magic? Is it voodoo? Is it magic?
Well, as a kid growing up in church or in Sunday school, where we always think we know the story of Solomon asking God, giving him these choices, and he chooses wisdom, to have wisdom, and God it's like he got zapped, with something. And all of a sudden he was wise. He knew things he didn't know before. And I have to admit that kind of image of wisdom just being a superpower that somehow you gain has probably not been that helpful over the years.
Got it.
For many, for myself included. And so having a deep understanding of not just simply sort of God give me wisdom and then all of a sudden you have it. It's what are the steps towards that? And let me quote for you Proverbs 4. I'm talking about Solomon. A couple of verses here from Proverbs. I think they're very insightful and really helpful. It says, and they're probably very familiar for many people, but it says, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. So there's this personification of wisdom. It's something you get to know, something you acquire, almost like a relationship, and that. So do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding. So obviously there's a priority being set here. This verse, in verse 8, is one that's really significant. It says, cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. It removes the need for self-promotion.
Right.
Wisdom will promote you. Wisdom will bring honor. And then in verse 9, she will give you a garland of grace for your head and present you with a glorious crown. Flowery words, but significant words about this idea of being able to do something with this thing we call wisdom. And we won't go deeply into the definitions of the word, but for me, for our purposes as a leader, I'm going to just simply use the idea of leading others and ourselves with skillfulness.
Right.
We see that in the first example, or the first place in Scripture where we see the gifts of the Spirit of God coming on Bezalel and Oholiab, when they were given wisdom or skill to build the tabernacle. It's not something that comes that we see, the gifts of the Spirit that start to emerge at Pentecost and in the New Testament were predated by the book of Exodus, where God's Spirit came on people and they were given skills. They were able to use the knowledge they had to do something that was productive and helpful and enhanced by God. So
I really like this, Bruce, because as you're saying it, it's reminding me. So you're talking about, here's the first time we see the gift of the Spirit, and in my brain I go, no, it's not. That's in Galatians. And I went, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And it's reminding me of Ephesians 1, where it talks about the Spirit comes with wisdom and revelation. So the revelation in Exodus 35 is God shows them, I want you to build a tabernacle, and here's what it's going to look like. And then they come along and go, let's build it skillfully. So it's a both and kind of thing. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So in this instance, we know that there is wisdom that simply comes that, where we learn practical and skillful ways of accomplishing things.
Yeah.
Those are, we might call, worldly wisdom. But for a leader who is seeking to promote and expand God's kingdom, there's a deeper wisdom that comes that often pushes back and is almost contrary to the world's wisdom.
Right.
And that's the part that's a bit of a mystery. But we see it clearly in the life of Jesus, who really defied all kind of traditional logic and conventional logic about roles and leadership. He talks about, you see the way that the leaders of the Gentiles lord it over those who they lead. But I tell you, don't do that. The greatest among you is going to be the greatest servant. There's this flipped upside down sense of wisdom or skill in leading that Jesus demonstrated that really challenged the people that he was trying to shape and disciple.
Yeah, for sure.
They didn't get it for a long, long time. In fact, we're still trying to get it, right? Still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So it is, but I really believe that as we align ourselves and engage deeply in God's kingdom and His purposes for and not just simply the establishment of His rule and reign in the world, because the world's filled with people who rule and reign, and they do it to the detriment of others.
Right.
They in fact hurt a lot of people doing it. In God's kingdom, His rule and reign brings blessing and peace and prosperity and health and wellness and deep relationships. So we not only need to understand the need to help, participate with God to expand and the impact of His kingdom, but not just simply to do it, but how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and, and that's where wisdom comes in, skillfulness comes in, understanding the priorities of God's kingdom, understanding how God measures the metrics, the how he counts, how he measures, how he tells time is so different than what most of us grew up understanding.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
So,
That's really good.
so I wanted to dive in if I could, and I'm going to tackle 6 areas of life, we'll call it, that we need to apply the wisdom that we receive from God, the understanding of his kingdom, in order to navigate well, not only personally but as leaders. So we're talking about leaders, obviously, and I'm
Right.
going to do this under the banner of well, I'm taking this from a teaching that my wife and I do with couples to help them grasp some of the things they need to know in order to to lead their marriage well and to have kingdom impact through their marriage. And so we're going to look at 6 different areas and take a few minutes on each one. It'll be a very kind of high level touching on these, but hopefully they're helpful to kind of orient people towards some of the things that need to be understood in order to skillfully navigate the culture and the world that we live in. And I want to start by talking about what a friend of mine, Glenn Smith, calls the heavy tendencies of our culture. And Brian, I think you and I have chatted about this in the past or talked about these things in the past. Let me just quickly go over them. And then we won't be able to touch deeply on any of them, but just to give you kind of an awareness, we all are impacted by the culture that we live in. And the culture that we live in has what Glenn calls heavy tendencies, things that kind of put pressure on us, and it comes at us in all different ways. But he talks about things like the intense secularity of our culture. The reference point is never God. The reference point is me, human, the human creature. And
Yeah.
so that's that secularity, that thinking through life in that way. There's the hyper individuality, this me centered universe that if it works for me, then it's all good. Doesn't matter what it's doing to others as long as it works for me. The third tendency that he talks about is consumptionism. And man, you don't have to go far to see how that is entrenched in the marketing that's we see and that we're bombarded with on almost nonstop. Every year there's a new version of this that we get to consume and throw away the old, and we live in a constant state of consuming things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the next one he talks about, and this one is again, it's very obvious. It's the sexualization of almost everything around us, from advertising to clothing to everything around us is somehow has a sensual element to it, and there's a sexualization of it that creates an attractiveness for us. It pulls us in. It obviously appeals to the eye and the senses in a way that's not healthy and certainly doesn't help promote a wholesomeness in terms of relationship. And then the last one may be less obvious, but I think it's actually one that's quite significant, and that is the issue of prestige. This somehow gaining acknowledgement that we've arrived, we've got it, and that comes out in almost everything that we do in terms of consuming. We consume things in order to gain prestige. Whether it's a house, whether it's a car, whether it's a job, whether it's the relationships we have, we really feed this idea of prestige. And so these heavy tendencies influence us. They can't help but influence us. And if we're not aware of them, we will end up really being guided and pushed along by them. We could go deeply into this, but my point today is more to bring awareness. So,
Yeah. It's interesting. Your dialogue before about the need to navigate, because it's clear that even just these 5, and that was 5 under the first the first pressure of life being
Oh
the heavy.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we could talk about the reach for a long time, knowing it's real, but the need for us to be wise in the sense of how do we navigate these things? Because if we don't, we get pushed along. We will get pushed
Yeah,
by these tendencies, right? That's the phrase I heard you say earlier. It's like
yeah.
all these things will push us unless we're wise about how to navigate, right?
And really, this is the awareness we need to have, that as king leaders who are focused on kingdom advancement, we need to be intentional. We should be the ones creating impact, creating awareness, creating change, not being pushed along by what the world's created.
Right, right.
Um,
Because if
and
we're not
and
doing that,
so
we're
that's why, yeah, we're not
sorry.
kingdom leaders if we're not doing that. So
100%. Yeah, we're
yeah,
not leading. At that point, we're not leading, we're following, right? So
no,
so
no,
kingdom leaders have a different mandate and create the culture that, as you've talked about several times already about that in the last few sessions about being those cultural architects. We have to do that to create the culture we want to live in, right? So
yeah.
we better jump into number 2 or we're going to
Yeah,
be
we got
for
to get
30
moving here.
minutes.
The second area is understanding social facts. And this was something that I came across, and I think it's helpful for us. It's akin to what we just talked about, these heavy tendencies, but they are built in expectations within our world, within our culture, that we just sort of simply accept. They push us along, and social facts are things that are so deeply entrenched in our culture that we're not aware of them anymore.
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
are expectations that are put on us, and they're not always necessarily wrong or bad, but they're there, um, and they have a coercive quality about them.
yeah, yeah. Do you have an
And
example or
kind of,
two for us?
yeah, I mean, they're things that maybe sound simple, but the idea, I've got a bunch of kids and a bunch of grandkids, and we've always felt that, for example, we'll meet people who talk about, well, this is the terrible twos and the rebellious teens and all these things that we kind of lay on people, these expectations that have no basis in real fact, except that the ideas are so deeply entrenched, we almost create them because we expect them.
Right.
um, and so, I mean, that's obviously in the family context. There's the incredible influence or um, impact of preparing for your retirement. And I'm not telling people here, don't prepare, don't be wise under the banner of wisdom about your future. But their individuals become so enamored with preparing for something to come that they miss what they're actually should be involved in at the moment,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because society tells you this is the wise thing to do, this is the right thing to do. You know, uh, so there's, again, we could go deeply into this, but it's an awareness of the impact and influence of our culture that we live in, and we become so accustomed to that we lose that kind of awareness that it's actually making decisions for us,
Yeah.
causing us,
No.
creating the values that are maybe not necessarily kingdom values.
Yeah. Really good, Bruce. And the wisdom to identify those, put them through the kingdom
Yep.
lens to see if they are kingdom ideas or whether we just
Yep.
got them from our culture. Really good. So let's go on to number
Yeah.
3. This is
Totally.
good. So the
Totally.
number 3
So the
is
third one
choosing
here
delayed
is
gratification.
the power of delayed gratification. Understanding this concept of delayed gratification, because our culture is obsessed with immediate results, immediate gratification. And you don't have to go far to see that, whether it's in terms of, quick fixes, do this diet and lose this much weight. And, we have all these artificial ways of even enhancing our physical appearance. And there's things that where we are absorbed with the idea of immediate gratification, and that doesn't fit well with kingdom thinking and kingdom pursuit. we know, and Jesus again teaches us well on this, that the idea that we sow and then we reap. There's a process. There's a cultivation. Things that are gained too quickly are often not understood or appreciated, and so delayed gratification is a deep principle of spiritual development and growth. And the small seed that grows into the big plant takes time and effort, and yet we're again so bombarded with this idea that get immediate results, and our whole system of borrowing and credit is kind of built on that desire to get something quickly and
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
So again, we can't go deeply into this, but I think people will understand delayed gratification, whether it's your finances, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in learning and education, is where the best results, the most healthy results, and the most sustainable results
Excellent.
come in human relationship and in leadership.
Yeah, excellent. Choosing delayed gratification. Number 4 is living with the paradoxes of life. What? How
Yep.
does that flow?
Well, I don't know if you feel this, Brian, but there are times when there are competing priorities in life.
Yes, I do.
And it happens, right? There are things that demand our attention, and we we struggle because there are other things that are demanding our attention. And I remember sitting and talking with someone about this, and in fact they were teaching about this very thing, and they said, look, get used to it. You can't remove these tensions, these paradoxes that are in life. You've got to learn to manage them. You've got to
Yeah.
learn to understand them, because they're going to be there, right? We have work and we have family. We have things that we want to do in terms of just in terms of maybe even hobbies or areas that we want to invest time in, but we have other obligations and other responsibilities, and so there's this tension, and the pace of life that we currently live in doesn't necessarily help us in that regard, because we're probably all just doing way too many things, trying to do way too many things.
Yeah.
And so managing those paradoxes, those tension points in life becomes really significant, and we need to do it skillfully.
No, that's really good. I years ago started talking about the same kind of thing. I think it's the same thing where I often spoke to people about the beginning of the Tale of Two Cities, which says it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Because I think
Totally.
even in all of these areas, well, in the family, it's like, look at how great this is, and like, look at that challenge. And in ministry or in your business, it's like it is that tension. It is. Is that what you're speaking of?
Yeah, we can't avoid living in some of that tension,
right?
Because that's life. Because that's the world we live in, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and so we have to not just simply try to eliminate those things, because to do that we'd have to do nothing.
Right.
But we need to be able to manage them, and with wisdom and skill navigate those paradoxes, those tensions, those things that pull us in two different directions.
Yeah, I feel like number 5 we're about to hit on. I feel like number 5 will help us with that. Well, maybe with all of them, but specifically what you just said. So this was living with the paradoxes of life. Number 5 is restoring a Sabbath heart. What does that mean, and how does that work?
Well, I wish we had about 2 or 3 hours to dive into this, but we don't.
Hey, we have as long as we want.
I would say
people may not stay with us, but we can do as well.
I know what you're saying, because this was very meaningful for me personally, because maybe you're like me, and maybe a lot of people are. You kind of build your image of who you are around what can I get done, what can I do, right? My ability to make things happen becomes your image, right? And that's no different from the person who's working in construction and tradesman to the executive in a, or the CEO of a large corporation. We build our image around the things that we can get done, the things that we do. And I remember kind of being impacted in this way by a significant author that I appreciate. Mark Buchanan is his name. Wrote a book called The Rest of God, and it was a play on words, because in order to know the rest of God, I need to know the rest of God.
Right.
There are things I can't know about God except in rest and in resting. And I'll give the primary point that was the biggest turning point for me in this area. And I wish we had more time. But it was moving from receiving rest as a reward to receiving rest as a gift.
Yeah,
and
say that
we
again.
see
That's
rest.
really yeah,
It's moving from receiving rest as a reward for having worked hard to receiving rest as a gift from our Heavenly Father.
Right.
And we see that it's embedded in the creation story. It's embedded in the story of the children of Israel, where God purposely creates a time of rest, and He gives it as a gift, not as a reward. And the idea of a Sabbath heart is someone who can rest in the midst of their work, who can simply say, I'm stopping and I'm resting because God said I could, not because I accomplished something or because I got something done. I mean, you've probably seen this, and I've seen it many times. People who go work hard to go on a really what would be considered a very luxurious or expensive vacation, and they come home a week later or 2 weeks later, and they're more exhausted than when they left.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. And because the world's rest doesn't work. It doesn't provide that restoration that God's rest does. And I would put this under the banner of simply rediscovering the gift of Sabbath, of rest.
I love that. I love that.
It's a deep part of spiritual formation that I'm still gaining understanding of. But love to go deeper. But we maybe in another time.
Well, it's like we said. I think all of these we could talk about each of them for half an hour, right?
Yeah.
Just and still not.
Oh yeah,
still just
for sure.
Yeah. But let's move on from number 5 to number 6, which is understanding the best kind of blessing. So I love it when people use superlatives, because now I know what I'm supposed to do. So what is the best kind of blessing?
Well, let me present this. We typically think of blessing as somehow of getting something, right? I got this and it was a blessing. Someone did this for me and it was a blessing. And that's correct. Is that element of someone giving us, of providing something that helps, something that brings something good into our lives. But as I read through, for example, Matthew chapter 5 and the Beatitudes, what we would call the Beatitudes, blessed are you when, there's something deeper there than just getting something. All of those expressions of blessing, of people who are blessed, actually are about environments where people are giving. And this is this upside down nature of God's kingdom.
Right.
Where they're showing patience, where they're showing mercy, where and at the end of that, we see this remarkable statement: blessed are you when people persecute you and say all kinds of evil about you. Rejoice in that time. Why? Because it's about identifying with your Father in heaven. And so the deepest type of blessing, or the deepest understanding of blessing, is the privilege we have of partnering with God's plan and purpose to achieve His ends, to see His kingdom come and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven, which often has associated with it some sacrifice, some even some challenges, and even often some, um, where we're persecuted for it. But it's such a deep blessing to be partnering with God in that we actually can rejoice in it. And that's a different level of blessing than what we often think about when we talk about blessing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we throw that term out there pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. Amazing.
And don't think too deeply about it.
I love that. I think that's so true. It makes it harder because blessing sounds like better. It sounds better to me when somebody's giving me something that feels like a blessing, but I have to agree with you. So it is that connecting with God's kingdom, his heart. What does it look like to participate in that? So
let me just give you one quick example that maybe will help people understand that. I loved when my kids were little, when they were babies and toddlers, and we could play with them. But in that setting, my wife Wanda and I had to do everything for our kids, and that was a season of life, and that was important, and we appreciated and loved that. But that can't, as much as that was an enjoyable thing, nothing replaces the depth of relationship and partnership that we can have with our adult children.
Right.
And the closeness, the closeness in terms of goals and understanding and affection, and that where it's reciprocated. And so really what we're talking about here is growing up to this idea of being ambassador. 2 Corinthians 5 talks about us being ambassadors of God's kingdom. An ambassador is has a close, intimate relationship with the authority that they're representing.
Yeah.
They're not infants. Everything isn't just simply being done for them. They're actually participating in something of significance with the king of the authority of the realm that they're representing. I believe that's the relationship Jesus calls us to move past just getting stuff from God to actually participating and providing stuff for God and his kingdom.
Yeah.
And you need wisdom. You need understanding to do that.
Yeah, it's so good. Love that. So we're wrapping up here, and we have a list of another bunch of things that will help us. But what we're going to need to do for today is just kind of let's list these. People have probably heard them before. Here's some things that you need to do to not acquire wisdom, but apply it. What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll go through very quickly. I know our time's running out. I love talking about this stuff. One of the things that's simple in this, as a leader, you need to be diligent. Leadership doesn't happen. Leadership is something you do. And so you have to be diligent and be aware. You have to be a lifelong learner, because we never stop learning. We never stop growing. We never stop learning to how to do things, to navigate. One that probably gets overlooked, but in order for me to serve well, in order for me to lead well, in order for me to participate in God's kingdom, I need to be healthy. And so appropriate time for exercise and health is necessary. That's maybe not always thought about, but man, there have been a lot of people who've been removed from effective leadership simply because they didn't see the signs and take the time to actually look after themselves physically. Personal finances. How are we managing our money, our finances, and in order to position us to be able to contribute time and energy towards what God's called us to. These are all practical things that need to be part of how we lead skillfully. Intentional accountability. And that's probably one where guys may struggle more than maybe women do, but just making ourselves open and vulnerable to questions from other leaders that we respect, other people that we respect, who can simply ask us some pretty serious questions at times. How are we doing? How's this part of our life? How's this part of our life? Personal integrity and purity obviously goes hand in hand with that accountability. The Bible would put it under the banner of renouncing secret and shameful ways.
Right.
Stuff that's not helpful, stuff that's unhealthy, stuff that's wrong. We get rid of it. Coming back to this idea of Sabbath, work-rest balance, not work-life balance, work-rest balance, because work is part of life.
Right.
It's, so appropriate work-rest balance and prayer. Obviously, we need to be communicating with God through the Spirit to know what He wants us to do.
Yeah, so good. So much stuff in here, Bruce. Is so good. As every week I do with you, I encourage, as you're listening today, you may want to, usually I'll just be honest. Sometimes I listen to podcasts or stuff and I put them on twice the speed because I'm taking in. I think with yours, I'd slow it down and go, okay, how do I do this? So that's good. That's good news. So as you're listening today, it's not about just getting information. It's never for us at Kingdomize getting you information. Although we want that, information is important, but that application. So what does lifelong learning look like for you? What is intentional accountability? What is work-rest balance? That alone could be a great discussion because I love how you redefine that between work, not work-life, but work-rest. So all of that is important. But as we're wrapping up today, give us a nutshell of why is this important? Why are we talking about wisdom? What does it look like? What do I need to do? Just wrap it up.
Yeah. So the big question for me here, and to leave people with, is to ask themselves: am I navigating life? Am I the navigator, or am I being pushed along by something else, somebody else, some other priorities, some other influences? Who's doing the leading? Because how can we lead others if we're not even if we're not leading ourselves? And we need to make sure that we are not allowing the expectations and the pressures of the world we live in to dictate to us our actions and how we're spending our time and how we're investing in people's lives, and begin to see our leadership through the lens of God's kingdom purpose. Because His purpose for His kingdom and His purpose for people's lives are always aligned. Yeah. It's never one at the expense of the other. That's the beauty of God's kingdom. It brings health to everyone that submits and participates in God's plan and purpose.
Excellent. Really good, Bruce. Always good to be chatting with you about leadership. And as we said at the beginning, this is lesson 5 on kingdom leadership. So if you haven't listened to the rest, I really encourage you to go back and listen to what Bruce has been talking about over the last few weeks and months as we've been talking about kingdom leadership. So yeah, you have been listening to Kingdomize the podcast with Bruce Mann. I'm Brian Beatty. And please, if you're listening to this, if you're enjoying it, share it with somebody. Like, on that, there's a button down there. Hit that button and like what we're doing and subscribe and tell people all over the globe. That would be really important. And so, we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. You've got wisdom now. You can live. So that's good, Bruce. You've allowed them to be able to navigate life, which is really important. And it helps us. It helps our families. It helps those we lead. How does it get better than that? So really, really good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.